Welcome everyone. We have some folks also joining us on Zoom, and we have some folks here. Thank you for joining us this morning to today's Parent Enrichment Program, or PEP Talk. Today we'll be diving into the final year of primary. It's well understood that the subconscious mind is programmed during the years of birth through 6 in human beings. The experiences from these years become a foundation of an individual's personality, of their values, and their attitude towards learning, because what they experience at these times become kind of like a background of obviousness with which they engage for the rest of their life. These experiences really have a very disproportionate impact in the life of an adult. And we don't easily have access to these times and these experiences, but they are always in the background as we think, as we engage, as we learn, as we act. And that's where the 0 to 6 age group, the neonatal, the toddler, and the primary communities in our school environment really play a big role. I have with me Janet McDonell. She is our pedagogical director at the 3 to 6 level here at Fiore. She works closely with the guides at the primary level to achieve that important foundational development for all of your children. Janet is an experienced AMI guide, trainer, and consultant, and we are incredibly fortunate to have her with us at Fiore. And this morning, I always hang on to every word Janet says because there is such depth and such clarity in the thought process that it's just really very powerful. So welcome, Janet. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. And I must say that I feel very fortunate to be with Fiore. It is a school that is wholly dedicated to the child. I've seen hundreds and hundreds of schools over the years, most of them quite nice. This school is stellar, absolutely stellar.
Janet's going to kick us off with some background on the core principles of Montessori and primary. So we're going to kind of set the stage for the conversation today.
Well, the thing I find most compelling about Montessori education is it totally follows what we know well about human development, specifically child development. I don't know of any other approach to education that follows the development of the human being, specifically their social and emotional life, and even more important is how they learn. So that's what attracts me to this work, and I've just seen it have such a wonderful impact on children. The whole child is considered. You'll hear me today talking about intellectual or academic and then social. There's other aspects to that as well, but we're really considering the whole child. The 3 to 6 environment, we call primary environment, is there's a 3-year age span to that, and that is very thoughtfully created to be a community that has all children who are in the same stage of development, of course, on their own journey towards development. It results in a very rich classroom, individual personalities, individual differences, children inspiring each other, children helping each other. So it's very rich intellectually and it's very rich socially. A real community gets developed, and we see children at different stages taking different roles in the community. They all have a role. They're a valued person in the community. It's just lovely. That sense of community is very, very important. A lot of change happens. I mean, the greatest changes are from birth to 3. The second greatest changes from 3 to 6. So enormous changes happen. I've met just a couple of you for the first time today, and I remember when I met your children not this past fall, but the fall before, and I can see them. And now I look at them and, oh my goodness. Not just physically different, but becoming. So that's what children do at this time. They become themselves. We have a curriculum. I hesitate to say curriculum because that seems to imply we've got this thing, you do this today, this tomorrow, this the next day. We have a plan. It's a very specific plan. We offer things at very a sequence that suits the child. So everything's engineered for the individual, but we have a very sequential idea of, at this point, this child's ready for this, and that's going to prepare for this. So everybody can get their needs met as far as development goes, also within living in that community. So we strive, because observation is a big part of our work, is to connect the child with the right experiences at the optimal time in their life. We also take advantage of the way a child learns, and that's the miracle. My colleague Jennifer Shields calls it the superpower of children, and it's called the absorbent mind. That's how children learn at this age. It's incredible. We don't remember learning that way. We can't learn that way, but they learn just by being in an environment. Any environment they're in, they're learning. How do they learn? They just absorb, right? They just absorb. We can't stop that absorption. So that's why the environment is so important, not just the school environment, but every environment they're in, the home environment. But their learning is incredible. They're not aware that they're learning. Even though they put effort into many things, they're not trying to learn, right? So they learn kind of effortlessly. So that's why that observation is so very important. They learn this way throughout the stage of development, but for the older children, we start beginning to see logical reasoning that they never had before, and an increasing sense of who I am. So they're much more aware. Questions?
A little bit of a background, just what happens, 3 to 6, primary. Quick 2-second overview.
So should we talk about what happens in the third year?
I do have one question.
Yeah, please.
Is there any sort of balance that's required for the Montessori? Like you need a certain percentage of 3s, 4s, 5s, and 6s.
It's nice to balance it, but it's nice to balance it.
And what is the benefit to having
1/3, 1/3, 1/3, half boys, half girls. Nobody ever achieves that exactly, but that's what we're aiming for, simply because it gives the most variety in the classroom, the greatest mix. Yeah.
So how about I ask the next question? I know Henry's in a class where it isn't exactly that kind of a mix. So, Janet, why does a school like us still, continue to have that kind of a setup? What is the benefit to those children, or how does it still benefit them if it's not that kind of a split?
There's an optimal situation, but that has so many different factors. But we have like a minimum amount of children, I would say. I don't know exactly what that is. It depends on who's there. I think Montessori definitely is a community experience. It's definitely a community experience. And we don't want to just, especially if you're beginning a classroom, we want to begin it gently. We don't just want to start with 30 children who've never had Montessori before. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be very difficult. So the way we do it is gentle, and we want to see that children have some peers. They don't need a great number of peers their age at this age, but we want to see variety, which I do see in all the classrooms here. But when you're beginning, you want to keep it small, and you're gradually adding to it. And
you add from the younger ages?
Mostly you do. Sometimes there's children who have had Montessori and move in. So we want to make sure if we take anybody older that they're going to be able to handle the freedoms and the opportunities for decision making in the classroom. So mostly it is from the younger. So yeah.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Yes.
So let's assume that if there was only a few children or 1 or 2 children who are older in a classroom of the oldest age, how would they still continue to learn? Is it
How would the children continue to learn?
Yeah.
Who are the oldest
Uh-huh.
in a classroom? How would they continue to learn?
Meaning if the group is not very large.
Yeah. Well, they don't know anything else, right? So they're born with this impetus to grow and to experience and to learn. So I think if there's fewer children at a certain level, maybe at the top level, is that what you mean, the third year?
Yeah.
They're more powerful in the classroom, actually. They're more noticeable in the classroom. They're more aware of everybody else. Everybody's more aware of everybody else, but because they are in the third year, and I'll talk about that in a minute, they have the responsibility isn't put on them, but they kind of assume more responsibility. That's what I see in those situations.
So in the sense that, we have a plan for them, and we want
Oh,
them
yes.
we want to get them to be writing, to be doing whatever they do in the primary
Ah.
here as a leader.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, we've seen it happen, that regardless of whatever else, the child is already on their own journey.
Oh, everyone's
So
on
they're
their
trying-
own journey. Yes, everybody's on their own journey, definitely. Yes. There's no, if the class happens to be small, I don't think that there's less learning going on or less development going on. A lot of people would say, oh, good, it's a small class. The teacher will give more lessons and they'll get more learning experiences. That's not exactly true, but that is why we keep it small when we just start, because we want the whole thing to work. So we want it larger as the children and the community can handle it. But like I said, if it's a fairly new classroom, it's going to be smaller.
So let's kind of jump into the meat of the conversation for today. We're going to jump into the third year, so open-ended. So what happens in the third year, Janet? There's
Wonderful things happen in the third year. Truly, I can't tell you how many times. I taught for about 18, 19 years, and sometimes you look back, you've got your children that have been with you for 3 years, and you look back and think about when they started, and you just can't believe. You couldn't have predicted. Even though you see this over and over again, the consolidation, it's mostly that word I use over and over again, things consolidate that third year. So back to development, the personality is being formed in the first 6 years of life, and it's pretty much set. Believe it or not, any psychologist will tell you that, any child development person will tell you that. The personality is set, so you can see how important the first 6 years are. So we want to make sure that that development is supported until it's set. So children are very adaptable at this age. They can deal with things. They can deal with difficulties. They can get out of difficulties. So we really observe children for any issues they might have so that we can offer them what they need, because that's going to be a permanent part of them. So we're thinking about who is that person at 6 to 6.5 or so. Who is that person? Not that we're determining their personality, but we want to make sure they have what they need. And we want to make sure that they think about themselves in a way that's realistic. So we see those personalities coming to the fore. They are expressing it more. They're more aware of who they are, which they weren't before. But now it's like, well, I'm the person that da-da-da-da-da. This is what I like to do. I know how to do that. That I don't know how to do. I feel uncomfortable here. I feel comfortable here. I can help somebody. This is who I am. So what do we want for them? We've been supporting a child becoming powerful in the Montessori environment. We support them making decisions, following through, becoming aware of who they are, what they like, what they don't like. So we're really supporting that personality and learning. I mean, academics aren't separate from that. That's all of a part of it. We want them to solidify certain traits that we would like all children to have. We want them to see themselves as a highly competent person. The 4-year-old does not see themselves as a highly competent person. They don't see themselves as incompetent either. They're just where they are. The 5-year-old begins to start saying, who am I? We want them to feel competent. The 4-year-olds are perfectly competent. They just don't feel that way. The 5-year-olds, not only do they feel that way, but they have competencies that they didn't have before. So in this lovely little environment they're in this kind of family, over the 3 years or so, there is a continuum that we're looking at, that we're working towards. And when we're looking at social and emotional development, psychological development, we want a child who knows themselves. We aren't saying they're going to be the smartest person in the world or the most competent person in the world. A lot of them are very smart. They're all smart, but that's not what we're focusing on. We want them to know themselves. That's what self-competence is. I know what I can do. I know what I can't do. I know what challenge I'm willing to take on. I know what challenge I'm not willing to take on. So being aware, we want them able to make decisions, to follow through on them. We want them to be aware of their self-discipline, which we've been working on the whole time in the classroom. There's a big focus on that. We want them to be generous and kind and develop empathy, which we see the beginnings of in a practical way in that third year. We see them as non-possessive. They're not worried about who has what, or that I'm going to cling to something. They're very, it's not exactly the opposite of generous, but they don't need things in order to feel like themselves. They have a strong relationship with reality. And we also see joyfulness. There's a lot of joyfulness in the Montessori environment, but when you see a 5.5, 6-year-old who's fully integrated, they've got this deep inner joy. I'm a person, I can carry this, my self-identity, anywhere. I'll get back to that in a few minutes. So, what do they experience in the classroom? I'm very comfortable here. I know how to navigate. I know what these new children don't know who are coming into the classroom, and I'm going to help them. And I see that every day when I observe in the classrooms. The older ones just kind of, reminding people about things. None of that in here. Yes, come here. Oh, no, that's not the way to do it. This is the correct cloth. They're helping each other. They can solve problems. They're very comfortable solving problems because they've solved many of them on their own without having to go to the adult. They developed a sense of responsibility without even knowing it. This is my school, this is my room, this is my community, and they start taking on responsibilities just naturally. So they see themselves, we hear the word leader. I kind of like and hate that word. So I would say Montessori is not, we're not creating the political leaders of our future by any means. But we want children who know that they can lead in different circumstances. So we don't put pressure on them. They are kind of models. That doesn't mean they're perfect, but the younger children are very aware of them, and they're very aware of each other. So yes, they have that experience over and over again that they don't have until they're in that third year of saying, wow, I know my way around here. The sky is the limit. I don't need much help. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. So their self-identity, which again is fixed by about 6.5, means, I'm ready. I'm ready to move on, and I know who I am. Any questions about that? Kelly?
I have a question from somebody on Zoom. My parent said, would you say a bigger classroom is better for a very impressionable child? Is an example a sibling who tends to offer a path of least resistance and just follow the dominant child in a smaller class?
No, I don't. I don't think we have to fit children into certain environments, because every Montessori environment and every community, whether it's rather on the small side or the larger side, I think our responsibility and the opportunities are there for the child to get their needs met. So children don't get lost.
And the main reason is that they're creating themselves.
They are creating
through the
themselves.
actions that they take, usually with the materials and with the other individuals in the community. So it isn't about somebody else doing something to them. It is about what they're doing in a community setting because they've been accorded that freedom and responsibility and the guidance to be able to take that on.
Right.
Question about sort of access to material. So we know the rule is you can't work with something until you've had a lesson on it.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So by that kindergarten year, will they have had kind of a lesson on everything? Will they have access to everything? Is that kind of the expectation? Or?
Yeah, eventually, yes.
Yeah, okay.
There's always something more there, right?
Right.
So nobody ever Oh, I'm
I know
finished
it
with
maxes
everything.
out, but
Because
it's-
there's a lot of things that overlap between the primary and the elementary curriculum, so they don't run out of things to do by
Right,
any
but there wouldn't
means.
be like something that's, by that point, that's like, you know, this thing over here that you've never touched.
They have access to everything they've had a lesson on.
Okay, yeah.
All children do. But as they move on and
There's
develop,
more.
they lose interest in things that no longer
Yeah.
challenge them or engage them anymore. But they can still go back and use them. I've seen sometimes 5-year-olds go to what we have little spooning exercises that are for the very youngest ones. And sometimes I've seen 5-year-olds go and I'm like, that's so interesting. Why is that? And I kind of think of it as, it's kind of like, I know how to do this so well, it's my centering thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to do that a little bit until I get centered. Okay, now I'm ready to really engage.
This is actually piggybacking on that. So kids having to essentially like wait for lessons on various topics in order to engage and get to learn about X, Y, and Z. Does that, it seems to me like that kind of holds a kid back from the opportunities until the teacher has time to do a lesson.
No, that's not, that's the, waiting is very difficult for young children, so that in general. So I would talk about it more as a customized experience. So there are things, children aren't waiting to work with that material. They are not ready for it, right? So that, you know, a child will go over to the beads that are hanging, those beautiful glass beads. Oh, I want a lesson on that. Well, really what they want is to touch it, maybe turn it into a necklace, who knows? They don't want to count to 1,000. They don't know how to count to 1,000, right? So over their orientation period in the primary, they come to learn that the guide is going to show them something that they find interesting. And all those other things, I don't think they feel deprived that they haven't done it, but they're not ready for it yet. And they see it's something the older children are doing. They can dust it, they can look at it, but they actually wouldn't be able to interact with it. Like I said, there's a sequence of materials. There's slowly increasing difficulty, and things build on what was done before. I can give you a couple examples in a minute when I talk about materials. Any other questions?
I've been asked to repeat the
I'm
questions
sorry, I
so that we
forgot
can,
about
everybody can hear it on Zoom as well.
I'd love for you to discuss how families can support the third year at home.
So the question is, how can families support the third year at home?
Okay. I'm going to put that off just a few minutes.
Yes.
Because what I'd like to do is talk about what happens intellectually or academically. And that has to do with your question a little bit. So we have this sequence. We have an approach that Montessori calls indirect preparation, indirect instruction. We offer children an orientation to the materials, but all the materials designed so the child makes their own discoveries. They explore with it. So we show them how to work with it, and the real learning goes on when we leave them alone with it, and on their own they become engaged and take challenges and explore with it. So they, again, aren't aware of what they're learning, but we see skills and realizations and discoveries, and then we move on to the next thing. So they don't know there's a connection, but there is, right? And it all kind of consolidates. So I'm just going to use reading very quickly as an example. We start preparing for reading from the time they come to us. We give these little sound games. They have no idea what we're doing. We show them the sandpaper letters. Oh, those are sounds like we have in words. They have no idea. They're preparing for writing and reading. But we break down the steps. We offer it to them in a way that's engaging and suitable to how they like to learn. Like those young ones love to trace. Like a 6-year-old would not find that interesting at all, but they're sensitive to these things at that age. So we actually, all the guides are going to do a presentation on the pathway to reading in February, so I encourage you to come and hear the details if you're interested. But believe it or not, the children, we don't teach reading directly. They discover they know how to read at a certain point because of all these little things that we've done, shepherding them through all the different aspects. And then in the third year, usually, occasionally we have a child who is a little early or a little late. It doesn't matter. That's not any cause for concern, but the children come to that unconsciously, that, oh, suddenly it seems I know how to read. So the way we offer reading is so brilliant, and I have talked to a lot of reading specialists who are astounded with what we do. That gets interrupted if they aren't there for the third year. They're going to go to a traditional curriculum of some sort that is probably direct teaching. This is the words you need to learn how to spell. These are the words you need to learn how to read. This is the way you need to write. Let's practice it over and over again. And very often it's the whole class. It's going to interrupt that. Are they still going to learn how to read and write? Yes, of course they are. But this lovely way, when they're in that period of the absorbent mind, when they're allowed to engage individually as long as they need to with materials, that's what leads to those. Montessori calls them explosions. There's only a few of them, but I've seen them. I remember reading about that. Explosion into reading, what is that? Yeah. But it happens. It really does happen. And they're like, if you were to ask them, who taught you how to read? They'd say, well, I just know. Or I taught myself, but they don't even think about them. It's something that I know, which is their whole life. They suddenly know things. They don't remember where. They don't say, my teacher taught me this. I know this. I know it by living. So I don't know if did that help with your question?
A little bit.
Okay. Yeah. Nobody's held back, and nobody is pushed forward too much, so we don't put pressure on children. But part of community living, which I think is delightful, is different people have different interests, different talents. Everybody knows how to tie a shoe really well. Or if you want to know the name of this country in South America, you can go over to so-and-so because he always knows it. And somebody has lovely handwriting, and somebody else knows a lot about ships that he likes to talk about. And that sort of thing. So everybody's different. They're all engaged in different things. We don't really want the children to feel as if they're being compared to anybody else. We don't put them into situations of competition in the environment, which really erodes self-confidence. So when they show an interest in something, which they sometimes do, we're very realistic about that. Oh, I see you're really interested in blah, blah, blah. If it was a 3-year-old in the beads, I'd say it's going to be a long time before you can take that out on the rug. In the meantime, would you like to dust it? Would you like to straighten it? If you just want to touch it a little bit, that's okay. Or it might be soon you're going to do that. This is what we need to do, and this before we do that. Should we get going on this? So hopefully they're all finding satisfactory, not more than satisfactory, but engaging material. That's our job, is to make sure each child is finding things that they're engaged in. And we see that children naturally get engaged with things that they actually need. You know, when they're struggling with handwriting, they'll practice the metal insets, which is the best thing for struggling with handwriting, right? So they, when we see a child concentrate and repeat, and those two things are very connected, we know we've connected them to the right material at the right time.
Yeah, thank you. So one question says that you mentioned about, every kid is different. There is some kids that are early, there are some kids that are late.
I wouldn't say even early or late.
Yeah, there is no definition of earlier and late, but.
Yes, but you got the idea.
The idea is that when a teacher thinks that, I feel this kid is little late or, she or he is need to get into the, like reading or something, which is getting delayed. What kind of, teaching or specific interest, targeted learnings are given to that kind of a kid, which needs,
Okay.
extra support.
Well, I will just say that we really spend a lot of time observing children. Every child's a little bit different, so I don't get terribly worried if some child is doing something a little bit later than most children in my experience. I do get concerned if I can't find something to engage a child, right? And so we give them a wide berth. We will, keep our eye on them. We don't usually have to do much because children like to develop, and these materials are so well suited to the psychology of the child. They're so hands-on, they're so attractive that most children engage with them. So if I'm seeing an older child who, if I'm seeing a child who's not remembering things that they do over and over, that's something I might look at. If I see a child who's resistant to doing anything, but if I see a child who does engage and doesn't seem to be learning, I'll just say that's very rare. Then we'll look into it, right? But the same thing is we see with behaviors as well. So it's not always just intellectual or academic learning. So I've had many children who have not been reading by the time they left my class at age 6, who were fine. My husband always says Einstein didn't learn how to read till he was 7. So, okay.
And your husband's an elementary guide.
Yeah. And he didn't learn to read until he was 7 either. So we really look to see how the child is feeling about themselves, right? But if they're resistant to engaging, then we have a problem, and we have to find out why.
So just a follow-up question.
But we don't tell children, you must learn how to read. We don't do that.
Yes.
We might say, we're going to have some sandpaper letter lessons right now, or today, or sometime this morning, we're going to have a sandpaper letter lesson. And why do we focus on that? Because reading is a part of our culture. Do the children need to know the names of every country of Asia? No. Some of them do. Some of them do. But it's not a thing to be worried of. But we want literate children, right? And we want to take advantage of the absorbent mind. So the teachers, or we find ways to make it a little more enticing for them. But yes, so we might say, this is something we need to, but we don't say you need to learn how to read.
No, that's good. That's good. A follow-up question on the discussion we had is that, so in your experience, do you think by any chance, Montessori strictly said that, no teachings or don't disrupt the teachings from the school into the house? Like, when the kid comes back to the house, if we want to teach or, make the kid to learn something, I kind of getting the impression from the school, from the Montessori itself, is that no, don't do anything, don't do any kind of teachings or learnings in the school because it's going to disrupt or break the chain or the pattern or the learning from the kid from the school. So my question is that do you think that the learnings or the teachings that the parents do in the home is causing a kid to the latest, not an earlier or later.
To take longer to assimilate.
Okay, so that kind of ties in with your question. What can we do at home? So I will say that any significant adult who interacts with a child has the opportunity to support the child's development. I don't think the parent becoming a direct teacher is necessarily the best idea. It depends. Now, so I'm talking mostly about reading and math. I'm not talking about let's look at the birds in our backyard and this, or all the things that you know that you share. So what you can do at home is be an interesting person to your child. Interact with them. Have conversations with them. Listen to what they have to say. Say, how was your day? Rather than, do you know how to read this word? Right? I've seen many a child, upon investigation, and the parents I don't blame the parent for wanting to get involved or supporting their child. So I would say talk to your guide about it, but the way we lead the children to reading, you have no way to support that at home except for to make sure the child is in a rich language environment. Oral language, reading poetry, reading good literature to them, having nice conversations with them, telling them the names of the plants and the trees and all that sort of thing. Just that is the best thing you can do for literacy to the child. If you want to teach them to read, you're not going to be able to do it the way we did. I have a confession to make. So I had my oldest daughter, after I'd been teaching many years, and she started Montessori, and, you know, she wasn't learning her sandpaper letters because I knew what sandpaper letters were, and I was asking her about it. So I ordered some sandpaper letters. Madeline, let's have a lesson. No. Oh, let me show you how. This is the one your name starts with. It's like, I tried it one more time, and then I said, you knew better than that. You knew better than that. And that's, that's the realm for school. She turned into a fabulous reader, a late reader, but loves to read. And I might have thwarted that somewhat. So it's not a big thing, but I don't know if it's going to help. So what I worry about is the children feeling some pressure from home. Oh, can you read this? Can you read that? I've known many a child, I was about to say this, that shut down then. Nope, I can't. I don't want you to read to me. And even it happens at school. I'm up. Nope. Anything to do with reading? Because why? It makes them feel inadequate. They're failing. You ask them to read, they're not able to. And your relationship with them is so emotional and so close, and your trust and all of that. So if there's something that makes them feel like they're disappointing you, or you're expecting something that they can't do, ooh, boop. So it depends on the child's personality, how they react to it. Some of them just out and out say no, and some of them pretend they don't know what's going on, and who knows? They all react differently. So I would say in the areas of math and reading, to talk to your guide. And I think they're going to give you the same advice I just said. I don't think they're going to say, why don't you do some sandpaper letters at home? Or why don't you have the child read these flashcards? We don't do that. They emerge. And I think, again, knowing, if you're concerned, talk to your guide. But if you go to that parent evening on reading, then you will see all the steps that we're doing. Not so that you can help with it, but so you can kind of, okay, because a lot of that they've been taking in is internal. There's all this internal stuff going on that we don't see until suddenly, whoop, they put those things together, that reading happens.
So there's a background assumption that or assessment we have, which is that the exact time that your child starts reading is not as crucial as how they experience the engagement with the written word and their own engagement with books and letters and sounds. So she can learn to read over another 6 months or over another year. It doesn't really have any long-term implication. But if we get anxious, whether it's the guide or the parent, and we exhibit that anxiety by saying, why do you know that? It's just this. Now you put it together, not that this. The chances that they're at least going to temporarily kind of be like this is very, very high, extraordinarily high, because our children are way more sensitive than we ever give them credit. They're pretty Teflon right? They can take a lot of stuff, come, let's go, we're going out now, we're staying home. We do all kinds of stuff with them, which life kind of needs to make happen. And they get through it because they're adaptable. But when it comes to really important stuff where they have to put themselves out there and be vulnerable, they need a protected, safe space. And that is what that classroom environment gives them. A space where somebody's not going to come and say, why did you not get this already? They're not going to be told, but so-and-so is in the AAP group or in the A group and the B group because they're good at that and you're bad at that, and blah, nothing like that. They're not going to be told, you've got to sit here until you learn this. Or, what is the other stuff that I've heard many times? Your parents sent you to school to learn reading. Let's get a move on it. I've heard these. These are actual live examples, right? And nobody's doing it out of meanness of heart. The adult mind is goal-oriented. This is where I want to get to. This is where I am. These are the steps. Now let's just get on with it. But the child is not goal-oriented in that manner. They're process and interest-oriented. And if you allow that process and interest orientation to take root at these young ages, they then learn that goal orientation and executive thinking skills in that second plane of development, and you put it all together, and they have this general joy about learning because they've never experienced the anxiety. And you'll see that time and time again when children from a Montessori environment go into a traditional environment, the things that the teachers notice are how they're different, how they are not, they can take it in their stride. Because at the time when they needed to be nurtured, think of the seedling, right? If you put the seedling, if you give it the right environment and a situation, it'll take root. And over time, you shouldn't be overwatering a plant or a tree which grows. You need the roots to grow deep and grow strong. But when they're the tiny little seedling, if you say, let it just figure it out, I'm going to let it find its own water, that's not sufficient. So we're protecting them only during these first 6 years in the way we are. Then in the second 6 years, we still need to accord them a different kind of protection, but very different from 0 to 6. Very, very different. That's why you'll see a fundamentally different approach when you get to the second plane at the elementary. And then, yet again, a change in the third plane. So the crucial piece is the common understanding you have about learning, etc., is not untrue. It's just not this time. There's a time in their life when those kinds of goal orientations and, this has to get done, there's this deadline. We have a 16-year-old at home, he's doing an SAT exam. Reasonable time, but that's the difference. You don't have to worry about that stuff now because that is the sole focus of the environment, which is to get her to be in a place where she wants to teach herself reading because the ambition is absolutely there. We're kindling it. I'm going to move over. I know you had a question.
I think you just answered it. So I was going to bring up kind of the competition and lack of pushing, kind of keeping them safe from that during these kind of 0 to 6 years. In the Montessori journey, when do you start inducing a little bit of that competition or push? But I think you just answered.
Do you want to add anything?
Well, I would say I haven't seen any evidence that it's natural for young children to compete. We put them in a situation where they can set their own goals. So in a sense, they compete with themselves. So it doesn't mean, competition is not a motivator by any means. They're not even aware of it. But it also can be, we are protecting them because it can erode their sense of self.
At this age, right?
Yeah.
And older, I would say too, but they're tougher about it, right? If they lose something, they're not losing their sense of self. But it's not necessary, and and it doesn't arise because we let children follow their own path. So Stylini just talked about that transition. I would say when they finish the third year, they're either going to move on to more Montessori or they're going to move on to a different learning environment. That time of life is a good time for a change. It's a necessary time for a change. We would not keep them in the primary, that sort of environment, if we had them. So why is it a good time for a change? They're fully developed as a personality. They understand the world. So you can put them in a restrictive learning environment and they can still deal with it because they have a strong sense of self. And they have self-discipline and they figure out how things work here. And they may not be so happy that they have to sit at their desk for so long because they never used to have to, but they can do it. They understand this is how everybody's doing it. Okay, I'll get with the program, right? That doesn't happen with a 5-year-old. That's hard. So changing before that plane of development is complete is difficult for children. Again, are they still going to develop and learn? Yes. Are they still going to be a wonderful person? Yes. But having that 3rd year helps them consolidate and have a relationship with themselves that will turn them into a person who can fend for themselves a lot, who can carry their strengths along with them.